So today's webinar is Audit with Knowledge, Results with Meaning. So let me take you through today's panel. You have myself, Di. I'll be your host. And next up we have Kelsey. Kelsey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kelsey, and I'm BICSc Technical Specialist.
Thank you. And next we have Dee.
Hi everybody, I'm Denise and I'm the Commercial Director.
Thank you, Dee. And finally we have Amelia.
Good morning, I'm Amelia and I am the Assistant Technical Specialist.
Thank you very much, Amelia. So it's now over to you.
Thank you, Di. So, audit with knowledge, results with meaning. Today we are going to be giving you an insight into the knowledge that you need to have in order to audit effectively. While we have innovative audit tools available to us, we need to ensure that we have the knowledge to mark audits effectively and correctly to promote the path of continuous development. In order to talk about auditing and knowledge around compliance, we need a standard audit to speak about. So, what better tool to use than the award-nominated BICSc Cleaning and Hygiene Audit app? If you have any questions, please just write your questions into the chat section and there will be time at the end to answer and take questions. So let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. Do we really understand what an audit is? Many people get confused around an inspection and an audit. According to the Cambridge Dictionary definition, to audit is to make an official examination of the quality or condition of something. Within the BICSc Cleaning and Hygiene audit, the user will conduct an audit whereby there will be an examination of the compliance actions and documentation relating to or of personnel, the cleaning cupboard, electrical equipment, health and safety, scheduling, quality control, and then with a very familiar cleaning inspection also conducted. So the real message here is that the audit isn't just about checking whether something is clean or dirty, but also why that may be the case. After all, in true BICSc style, you can't expect a floor to be vacuumed correctly if the operative hasn't been trained correctly. Now that we have the meaning of an audit covered, let's talk about auditing help from BICSc. What is available? So the BICSc Clean and Hygiene Audit app, the app is free to download for anyone and can be used by anyone. We also have free course available online to explain how to best use the app, but we'll have more on that in a moment. Virtual courses in inspection and auditing. The BICSc Virtual Training Suite and now the BICSc Training app hold many courses in inspections and auditing for different scenarios, and again, more to follow. BICSc Standards and Best Practice. With contribution from industry experts, BICSc Standard and Best Practice combines intelligence, experience, and knowledge. Access to the standards are offered free to BICSc corporate and accredited training members, but can be bought if you fall outside of this. BICSc Independent Cleaning and Hygiene Audits. For those of you who don't know, BICSc also offer independent cleaning and hygiene audits, where BICSc personnel can come to site and audit independently. Our portfolio for this work has seen us carried out independent audits both for the client and for the contractor. We have BICSc Training, BICSc CPSS training, the training we're all known for, also helps in your scope for auditing. If you don't know how to clean effectively, safely, and efficiently, how can we expect to audit effectively, safely, and efficiently? The BICSc Cleaning and Hygiene app, we will be using this a lot today. So let's talk about some key features you may not be aware of. So some key features, you can set your own assurance quality levels for rooms. For example, you may have different clients with different ideas of pass rates. These can be changed for each room type. A final PDF report, the app with valid subscription will produce a final PDF report showing all your findings from the app. This can be printed or emailed and shared virtually with all stakeholders of the audit. Fail, action and pass, grade with notes. You can grade each audit compliance question and give notes in written and picture form as feedback, bad and good. And you can do the same with failed elements, add comments and pictures to the report. Automatic date and timestamp, so there is no need to worry about writing down the time of the audit or wondering just where and when the audit was completed. As I said before, through our virtual training suite and the BICSc training app, we offer courses to help in auditing and inspections. Our course, The Theory of Cleaning Inspections, is a great one to start off with, as the programme covers the meaning of a cleaning inspection and then goes into more depth about how we should undertake that inspection. We describe the different soil and fault types and help you define the difference between a passed and a fail element. The course helps you to understand and use the correct terminology in your audit reports. Our license to practice also helps with the auditing and inspections, as we teach the candidate from the very beginning the importance of a compliant store cupboard and how to achieve this. I'm sure many of you either know or have done our LTP, but for those who haven't, we discuss the health and safety aspects of risk assessments, cost assessments, safety data sheets, standard operating procedures, and what they should be looking for that and what makes them not compliant. We go through with the candidate the safe use and care of both manual and electrical equipment and how we should store those after use. We also cover chemical storage, anything and everything the candidate needs to know about being safe and compliant. If you're auditing in a healthcare environment, then we also have courses that can assist you. And who better discuss these courses than our very own Kelsey, who wrote a cleaning operative's guide to the NHS technical cleaning audit and an auditor's guide to the NHS efficacy and technical audit. Kelsey?
How did I know that was going to happen? Okay, so the two NHS courses that we offer around auditing. So if we start with the Cleaning Operatives Guide to the NHS Technical Cleaning Audit, this was written for the cleaning operatives' understanding of the standards that came out initially in 2021. The technical audit came out and it had quite a few changes from the previous audits that we did before. So we thought it was important that the guys on the floor, the guys that are actually doing the job themselves, understand what this new audit's all about and the things that they may need to change about the way that they clean. So it goes through the technical audit, the functional risk ratings, the star ratings, all of the different people that are now involved. And when they see these amazing star ratings all over, that it's not just based on their own cleaning, but also we've got estate scores in there and nursing scores and clinical teams and things like that. And then it also teaches the operative themselves how to look at their own cleaning, how to sort of pre-audit themselves to ensure that they are doing the best that they can possibly do. And that's what informing is all about. That's what training is all about, that you want to get the best out of the job that you do. So that was the Clean Operatives Guide. And although the name suggests cleaning operative, it's also useful for people like healthcare assistants or even people from estates or other clinical teams or team leaders, supervisors, managers that just want to understand what that technical cleaning audit's about. And then we move on to the beast, an auditor's guide to the NHS efficacy and technical cleaning audits. So that's for the auditor themselves, again, whether they're from the cleaning services team, an estates team or a clinical team, on one, how to plan for audits, how to book them in, what sort of compliance we need to have in place for that. It talks about the difference between the efficacy audit and the technical audit. Again, all of the different compliance that we need to relate to in terms of NHS policy, what best practice might be, what the NHS recommends, but also talks about local policy and what may be different on site. Within this course as well, there's practical elements for the candidate where they're able to actually complete an efficacy and a technical audit through our online virtual training suite. And it's checked then by BICSc personnel to ensure that the candidate actually understands what's going on and is compliant and in line with NHS policy. So yeah, one's for the operatives, the guys that are doing the job, and the auditor one talks through both the efficacy and the technical audit and all those new standards and the tools that they need to have with them when they actually conduct those audits. So I guess that's back to you, Amelia. Thank you for that.
You're more than welcome. So free courses. Now, who doesn't love the word free? BICSc offer a range of free courses that anyone can access. One of our free courses we have is centered around our BICSc Cleaning and Hygiene Audit app, and it is a course designed to teach you how to use our app. You didn't think we were going to leave you to work it out for yourselves, did you? So in this course, we cover how to download and create your own account, how to manage your account and your subscriptions, a guide around our app showing you how to set your own assurance quality levels, how to change the name of the audit. We demonstrate how the marking section of the audit works and where we can add those supporting images and comments. We explain working with different rooms and how we mark this in our app. I don't want to go into too much detail as we'll be going into more depth as we continue on this morning. So we have our robotics cleaning course. Now, this is a great insight into robots and the different types of cleaning robots that are available to us and what is on the market. We discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of cleaning robots, and we even supply a glossary of terms to help with the understanding of robotics. Some of our free courses could also be used to help form part of your company's induction plan, as we cover subjects such as chemical hazard pictograms and understanding PPE. We discuss how to identify the hazard pictograms and what each of them mean in terms of health and safety. Each of our courses are split up into different chapters and lessons with a mix of voice presentations and videos and questions to answer at the end to test your knowledge and to test that understanding. BICSc has a course that takes us through the importance of colour coding and why we should follow colour coding. And we also have a course that touches upon the history of hand hygiene and why it is important that we wash our hands properly, with demonstration videos and charts of how this should be done. All of these free online courses help teach best practice and form part of compliancy. So back to the app. For those of you that already have it downloaded, feel free to follow along. For those of you who haven't, don't worry, there are lots of pictograms to help follow along. So in the BICSc Audit app, we have a list of audit sections, each holding questions for you to check the best practice and legal compliance of the cleaning service provided. The following sections are covered: personnel, the colleagues we have, those are the operatives that are carrying out the cleaning tasks. We have the cleaning cupboard, the level of safety and cleanliness within that cleaning cupboard. Electrical equipment, compliance questions relating to the electrical equipment, the safety of the equipment, and the practices that are in place. Health and safety, exactly as the name suggests, the legal compliance and site policy compliance to health and safety requirements. Scheduling, best practice around productivity, efficiency, and staff communications. Quality control, checks on the ability of a service to track its own service delivery and move forward. And then followed by the all-important cleaning inspection, where we do go to get to check what is clean and what is dirty. So with all that in mind, I think it's time I hand it back over to our technical specialist, Kelsey.
Fabulous. Thank you, Amelia. Okay, good luck, guys. I'm on for a while. So Amelia's just very nicely gone through all of the different sections, the compliance sections of the audit app there. And for the actual title itself of this webinar, Audit with Knowledge, Results with Meaning, we're going to go through a few of these compliance sections and the questions that are asked. And talk about the knowledge that we need to have behind these questions in order to mark them effectively, but also to give feedback that actually means something and allows the cleaning services team to develop and move forward. So we're going to start with the most important part of compliance, personnel, the people that we have. And this is obviously all about making sure that they're safe and ready for the work that they do. So the first question, which is amazingly on the screen. Are the operatives of a neat and tidy appearance wearing the correct workwear? Now, I selected this question because it's not necessarily something we think of straight away when we think of personnel and the safety and the compliance around that. It's a really important thing that we need to mark against because it involves the safety of the operatives, the morale and the professional appearance of our cleaning services team. So if we think about the safety, if we have people walking around in shorts and a lovely tank top or anything like that, and they're dealing with chemicals, corrosive chemicals, or, you know, really specialist electrical equipment, we need to think about how safe they are in what they wear. For the morale, we need to think about everybody being the same, everybody getting the same opportunity, and whether that's opportunity in work or opportunity to wear the same workwear. If we're only giving, let's say, uniform out to full-time members of staff, but agency staff or temp staff are not being offered the same equipment or the same workwear, what does that mean for the morale? Have we got a separation in the team instead of an integrated team? And then if we think about the professional appearance, it shouldn't be part of something that's looked at by the public or by clients. But if our team don't look professional, what does that say about our company or the service that we offer? So are the operatives in a neat and tidy appearance, not only for themselves and for their safety, but also for the output that we're putting out there about our own service? If we could move on. Okay, now a bit of a beefier topic when it comes to personnel. Was the correct PPE for the tasks being used? Now, there's so much to think about when it comes to PPE. PPE is imperative for a number of reasons. Obviously, personal protective equipment should be provided by the employer to protect operatives so they can safely conduct their task, as identified in maybe a task risk assessment or a cost assessment. And in another aspect of safety regarding PPE, cleaning those elements in a room can cause a threat of contamination. So as we move forward with innovation and we're talking about chemical-free cleaning, we also need to think about what it is that the operatives are actually picking up off a surface. It's okay thinking that there's no threat because of a cost assessment or an SDS that we receive, but we need to think about the type of environment that they're in. And alongside that, we need to think about the correct donning and doffing of PPE, hand hygiene falls into that, and whether people are compliant all the way through. Now, for PPE as well, that auditor has to have a different hat on. We need a legislative hat on, and we need to understand legislation as per our country guidance, if we are international, or around UK guidance. So in Great Britain, there is in the 2022 and the 1992 PPE regulations, a duty that every single employee should be provided PPE by their employer. That's a right for our safety whilst at work. And it's okay having the PPE, but the second part of that is understanding how we wear that PPE and what we do with it. So it's amazing to have gloves available, aprons available if we should need them, and goggles for certain chemicals or any other tasks that we might need to carry out. But if we don't understand when or how to use them, we're actually not keeping in line with that legislation. And then as an employee, as a cleaning operative, a supervisor, manager, or any stakeholder, when we receive this training in PPE, the employee has a responsibility to adhere to this training. So if we could move on to the next slide, why is this important? There we go. Okay, so if we think about the feedback that we're giving after an audit, that all-important rectification feedback, we need to understand where the source of this incompliance comes from. So let's take an example where a cost assessment recommends PPE. We've got it there. And we've marked the question as an action or a fail on our audit. We need to think about the outcome so we can move forward. So was it a fail because the employer, one, didn't provide the PPE? What does that mean? What rectification needs to happen for that? Was it that you provided the PPE, but actually you forgot to do the training on when gloves would be important or when goggles would be important? Or was it 3, that you've done your side of things, but the employee themselves isn't holding up their part of the bargain? The reason it's important to note these down in the rectification part, in the comments part of an audit, and to have this knowledge is because it's how we move on as a cleaning service and what we can put in place to ensure that every operative is kept safe. If we move on to the next section. Okay, so cleaning cupboard, our favourite room for everybody, I'm sure, on the call. There are 14 questions in the BICSc Audit app relating to the cleaning cupboard. Now, don't worry, we're not going through every single one of them. We're just going to go through a couple of these. Okay, so probably the hardest part of it for me when I started auditing was about HSE guidelines relating to heavy equipment and heavy items stored in cleaning cupboards. And again, it's important that we understand the HSE guidelines. As an auditor, you need to have so much knowledge in your head to ensure that whatever report you're giving back is keeping those operatives safe. So one that I definitely didn't think about, and one that I've taken to go home with me for my my wardrobe, is that if materials are stored high, at a really high height, you know, in the eaves of the cleaning cupboard, it's necessary that guardrails are in place. As secure as we might think something is up there, we don't want to be on the bottom end of it if it falls over. And then if we think about storing in the best position for these things, I've got this literally written into the notes on my iPad and my phone where I do audits, just so I can remember that heavier loads need to be stored at waist height, not on the floor to save our backs, and not up high for any falling, and again to save our backs. Lighter loads can be above shoulder height, and reserve storage should be below knuckle height. So if you have got really long arms, then, you know, follow the HSE guidelines. There is a link on the page here as well, which has a really nice PDF from the HSE website, which again states the same thing, and it's nice to keep with you at all times. So if we look at this on the next slide in actual practice, the picture on the right-hand side is a familiar scene. You know, it looks lovely and neat, it looks nicely put away, but we need to think about compliant storage. And we need to think about all of those other action points after. You know, is there a compliant storage system in place for the operatives? Are managers aware? Are health and safety aware? Has the operative themselves been trained in correct HSE guidelines? So it's okay having that in place, but as we all know, stores, cupboards, things like that, if it's a cleaning operatives or a supervisors, they treat it how they want it to be. They keep things where they want them for their own access. So if the operative themselves hasn't been trained in the correct HSE guidelines, then whose fault is that in compliance, and how do we move forward? But again, as we spoke about with the PPE before, if the operative has been trained and there is a compliance on site for that HSE guideline, what do we do about the operative not following these guidelines? So we're going to move on now to COSH policy in allowance with colour coding, chemicals and equipment. Now, obviously, colour coding is a much talked about topic in our industry. And although there is no legislative colour coding policy nationally or internationally, we do have some places that stipulate company policy of colour coding or equally follow BICSc colour coding. Colour coding is a fantastic control measure for controlling cross-contamination. And although it is really, really important to make sure that we're not using a red cloth in a blue area and all of that sort of stuff, I'm sure that both Denise and Amelia would agree when we've carried out audits, whether whilst in our time at BICSc or before, that most failures found concerning in compliance with colour coding is actually within the storage. When we're out and we're watching the personnel and we're thinking how amazing they are in their efficacy of using the right coloured cloths in the right areas, when we get back to the cupboard, sometimes it's a bit of a heartbreaking story of seeing blue cloths stored on top of red cloths. And it's heartbreaking to see where practice is great, but storage, it's just not up to standard. So that colour coding needs to be in place at all times. So if we go into the next picture, there we go. So I don't know if you can see in the top right corner, well, the top left corner, sorry, of the picture on the right, we can see a blue cloth on top of a red cloth on top of a blue bucket. Which, you know, we don't know whether the operative has cleaned with the blue cloth in a general area, for example, or a red cloth in a washroom area. But what we can see here is that there's an incompliance there. So we need to keep all of this in mind when we're looking at storage. Colour coding isn't just out on the floor, it's also back in our lovely favourite room in the store or the cupboard. So what we might see is different colour coded mops and cloths found and stored on top of each other. We might see chemicals stored in the wrong bottle or in an unidentifiable bottle. We have some great products now that actually are in line with colour coding in the industry that can help. But sometimes what we're seeing is a spray bottle with no label, nothing else on, and it's not in line with COSH policy or company policy. And then finally, what we also see is different pieces of equipment stored with no regard to contamination. Just last week, I saw a lovely mop bucket, red mop bucket with consumables stored on top. It was still wet. They'd given it a wash out, to be fair, but it still had chemical residue, I would suggest, on it. And it had consumables from both a washroom and from a general area stored on top of it. So again, we're not just thinking about a blue cloth on top of a red cloth. We're also thinking about all that contamination that might come into play in regards to colour coding and equipment from different areas. Okay, electrical equipment. There are 5 compliance questions relating to electrical equipment on the app, and we're going to look at one of the questions. Okay, this is like my big shock of the webinar. It was definitely a shock for me when I found out a few years ago. So the question for this one, are portable appliance testing stickers visible and in date, or an alternative system in place? Now, believe it or not, HSE guidelines do not state that PAT testing is a legislative action. It's actually not a legislative action that needs to be conducted. However, some companies do state that a PAT system needs to be in place. For example, the NHS, it's part of their policy that electrical equipment should be PAT tested. HSE requires there to be machinery checks done. There's just no prescriptive option. PAT testing is a great accessible option that many people use and adopt, but it's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily need to be done as long as other checks are done. So if we go on to the next slide, we need to take this into consideration. So if we're walking around and the company policy isn't to have PAT testing, that doesn't mean that the question automatically fails. However, we need to think about what else is in place. So if they are following PAT testing, we need to ensure that PAT testing stickers are not scorched or damaged and can be readable. If a PAT testing sticker is not readable to the operative has no way of immediately identifying that that piece of equipment is safe. So we might need to put an action on this question to ensure that, again, the operatives are kept safe. And if we are using an alternative system, it needs to be checked to ensure compliance. But this might not be immediately obvious. I've had some sites where I've had to go to the estates department to get an asset list to make sure that checks have been done by supervisors or by estates departments. And if that is the case, you might want to suggest as a way forward an easier way for operatives to be able to check that their equipment has been checked and is safe to use. For example, if these records are stored in an office the other side of the building or on a computer that they don't have access to, how is that operative aware that the equipment that they are using is safe to use? They can do their own visual checks on it, but there's no way of knowing that the electrical current's safe or things like that. So we need to ensure that there is an improvement in place of systems of checking if it's not immediately obvious to the operative. Okay, so in health and safety, now obviously a lot of these compliance sections are about health and safety, but the main section of health and safety in the BICSc Audit app is there are 6 compliance questions related to health and safety, and we're going to look at one of them now. So if we look at a record of the date for the next review of COSH assessments, so as most of you will know, COSH assessments are required by law, no matter on the number of employees. And the assessment should be reviewed annually or following an incident or a change in the material safety data sheet. The review date shown helps keep the operative safe and in the knowledge when safety measures could change. So if I read my COSH assessment and I see the review is next month, I'm going to make sure I reread that COSH assessment to allow myself to be in line with the correct standard and practice and to keep myself safe with PPE I may be required to use. So again, what we need to consider for this is if the operative has access to the COSH assessment or the review date. Again, what we see many times, as I'm sure Amelia and Denise would both agree with, is that COSH assessments are locked away or kept on a laptop that an operative doesn't necessarily have access to. So although there may be a date for review on the COSH assessment, is it really compliant if an operative doesn't have any access to it? If time has passed since the review date or the review, or if the review date is legally compliant. So it might say the review date is the 10th of November, but it's currently the 12th of February. Although there's a review date on there, the review date may not have been adhered to. So that's something we need to note in the conducting of the audit and also in the review that we give at the end. And now the biggest thing that we find, and you know, I'm as good of a hoarder as anybody, and I don't like throwing any legal documentation away, just out of fear. But what we also need to make sure is that old versions of COSH assessments aren't always kept in the same place as the new versions. What we see is a beautiful new compliant COSH assessment, and then just behind it an old version of the COSH where it's got a different material safety data sheet with it. And this can become really confusing for the operative, or they could flick past the new one and go to the old one, and then all of a sudden they're following out of date first aid measures or out of date PPE regulations. So what we need to do is ensure we keep it on file, sure, but nowhere near the people who are actually using it to complete their job. Okay, scheduling. There are six compliance questions for this. We're going to just look through one of them. So providing your cleaning operative and your supervisors with clear and concise yet extensive cleaning schedules provides them with the best opportunity to ensure that the building is kept clean to the highest standard and ensures that standards can be measured in relation to what has been measurably cleaned by the operative over time. Without sufficient cleaning schedules, you risk having elements not cleaned at all or not cleaned to the standard or frequency needed to create a clean and hygienic environment. Cleaning schedules should be filled out and shown what has and what has not been completed. They should be accessible at all times. And cleaning schedules should also be accessible to you, the auditor, or memorised by the auditor if you're feeling that good about it. Just so you can see, if we go on to the next slide, number one, what is acceptable between cleans? And making sure that it's not a tick box exercise where the operatives have ticked for 3 weeks in the future, where they've done that amazing of a job, they've already wiped the table for 3 weeks' time, and they did it on the Wednesday in 3 weeks' time. So we need to make sure that these are actually being followed and used as a way of measuring compliance. And we also need to make sure that the operative is informed at all times of what may be coming up. It's important that they understand what periodic jobs are done so that they can see any of the changes they may need to make to their cleaning schedules. Now, obviously, I'm a bit like over the top with this one because I love a bit of quality control. That's the whole reason for the webinar. But there are 4 compliance questions relating to quality control. So we're going to look through one of them now. So is there a record of follow-up to the management checking? Audits and quality audits are an integral part of running a successful service. Periodic checks help management understand the problems that cleaning operatives are facing and allow for changes to happen. After any check or inspection, rectification should be recorded and rectified, ensuring that service levels improve. So if we don't include rectification times from the management follow-up checking, we've got an issue there. There's no point in doing the check if we don't have a clear suggested time to rectify within. Records should be held so that recurring fails can be dealt with. So we have that evidence there to suggest what needs to improve. And again, there's no point in doing a check if we're not going to let the main people know. So again, we need to check rectification times. If, for example, we're auditing in the NHS and we think about rectification times for different functional risk areas, if we have a rectification time of 2 hours and when we're looking back through, we see that it's taken somebody 17 hours to rectify the fail, we need to think about what action needs to come out of that and whether that is an incompliance or not. We need to make sure that it's not just a tick box exercise where somebody's noticed a different fault type on site, they've noticed a failed element, and we're just ticking off, yeah, we've done it. Management need to make sure, or whoever is completing an audit or a check need to make sure that we are actually going back to check that these operatives and supervisors have actually carried out the rectification needed. And again, if we don't inform the operative, there is absolutely no point in doing a management check. Okay, now you'll be pleased to know that I am going soon. In the BICSc Audit app, there are 16 different area types preset that you can inspect. And Dee is going to have a look at the app and consider what we need to do to get the most out of the inspection part of the audit. Thank you, Dee.
Thanks, Kels. I'm going to start off by asking, and I can ask the team on here, what filthy means to you. So, Di, what does filthy mean to you?
Something really disgusting and horrible.
Okay. Amelia, how about you?
Something that when I look at it makes me go, ew, gross.
Okay, and Kels?
Something like built up with loads of dirt and grime and just horrid.
Okay. Now, seeing as there's another 176 of you on here, I won't go around everybody, but you can see just on that small group, filthy means different things to different people. So what we want to do when you're doing an audit with the app is actually use descriptions that everybody can agree with. So we want to keep things really clear and really simple. So in BICSc, we use descriptors for dirt. Don't tell me I don't know how to live. Now, the first one is light contamination. And this really means something that was missed on the last clean. It could be light dust, it could be a stain, a clear cobweb, even fingerprints. And it's only minimal effort to actually clean it back up to standard. Here you can see the mug has left a ring of tea, and yes, it was possibly mine, but it's very easy to clean it. So from light contamination, we'd move to heavy contamination. And heavy means it's been missed on several cleans. So it could be heavy dust, ingrained dirt, stains, scum, cobwebs where they've started to get flies or dark grey dust on them, and it takes a little bit extra effort to bring it back to standard. You can see with the picture, the side of the door. Why people don't use door handles, I'm not sure, but you can see where people have gripped the door, and you can see the fingers have left grease marks and then dirt, and then it's started to build up. So it'll take a little bit more because it's heavily contaminated. The next one we use is build up. Now, build up and heavy contamination are often said to be interchangeable, but they're not, because build up needs either a different method or a different product to remove it. So it could involve limescale, or it could involve a heavy build-up of dirt in a floor corner. It's been allowed to build up and it won't be removed by standard cleaning. So that extra effort or that different product is required to actually bring it back to standard. And this can be costly because it can take more time or different product. You can see with the picture, build-up in the floor corner, that's not going to mop out anymore. You're going to have to use extra effort, maybe a scourer, and possibly even soak it to actually get rid of the debris. The next one we've got is method failure. Now, often we hear that anybody can clean. I would argue with anybody that says that. If you're not trained properly, you can't clean properly. And method failure actually leaves a trail of debris and dirt behind you. So it's been cleaned, but not correctly. So it could be a smeared surface, it could be streaks, it could be this morning's walk on the hotel floor where I actually heard the underneath my feet as I walked because somebody had put too much product down. And unless staff are trained on the correct method, you're going to get method failure. So the supervisor needs to look at the chemicals, the equipment and the training. And you can see here on the corner of the mirror the smears where somebody hasn't buffed the mirror. They've wiped over with a damp cloth and left it so it still looks dirty. Following method failure, we've got debris, and we've got two types. We've got loose debris, which could be litter, it could be a packet of crisps, it could be a drink can, and we've got impacted debris, which could be chewing gum or adhesive labels. Obviously, the loose debris is easier to move. The chewing gum, which I would ban, and adhesive labels take extra effort to remove. You can see in the corner some chewing gum right in the corner, and frankly, I'll pick up the litter, somebody else can have the chewing gum. On the next slide, we're going to ask you, what do we need to consider? When we say we audit with knowledge, results with meaning. We've hopefully shared some of the knowledge that you need to put through on that audit. You need to be mindful of the tools and the training that are available to you. Take the free courses. If you don't know, ask the questions. And if you need to understand the individual policy, not only of your site, but also the legislative policy, I'll find my teeth as well, to audit compliantly. Because your results from inspections only have meaning when you've got that knowledge underneath. And you need to have the knowledge to conduct an audit fairly. And also for it to actually improve the standards with the information you're supplying. And now I'm happy to say I'm handing back to Di.
Thank you. Right. So we had everybody had to ask a question in order to register for the webinar today. And as you can imagine, we had quite a few questions to get through. We've got a selection of them, so we will crack on with these at the moment. I will bring in Neil if we have any technical questions. And if we have time at the end, we'll do those that have come through on the chat as well. So the first question for you, Dee, is how do you remain unbiased? Part
of that is actually having the knowledge to audit fairly. And the The audit app actually takes you through the questions I think you need to answer, but also it gives you the ability to actually put photographs in. So it's not me saying to you, it's filthy. It would be me saying, there was light contamination and here's a photograph. Or there was build-up, so limescale on the bottom of a tap, photographed, and this is where it needs to be removed. So your bias is removed by being factual and by giving photographic evidence and clear instruction about what the standards were.
Thank you. Are there different levels of auditing depending on the work being carried out?
I think for me, most people confuse inspection with audit. So a cleaning inspection can just look at the cleaning standards. I would say to audit something properly, you need to consider all the items that we've raised because you're trying to solve the root problem. And there are different standards. Sometimes you've got 15 minutes, just do one small room. If you've got the time, do different rooms and make sure that you don't do the same rooms or the same pattern all the time.
Thank you. Should the client be involved with the auditing process?
For me, it's a big fat yes. I'll let Amelia's nodding, Kelsey's in there somewhere. But if the client's involved in the audit process, they know what you're finding, they know what you're dealing with. But also, you've got a chance to actually show them, if you do the audit before the cleaning starts, what your staff are facing. So they can actually give input from where their premises are involved as well. So I always think the audit with the client as well is really key to ensuring everybody sees the same thing at the same time.
Thank you. What's the most effective way of managers carrying out audits where the follow-up actions or non-compliances are trackable?
So when you've put the audit app there, you've got the photos, you've taken the photographs, and you've explained to the staff what you've found. So a non-compliance is only a non-compliance until it's remedied. So you need to actually explain your findings and then actually follow through. So I know Kelsey's got something to say on this one as well. She's just turned a microphone on. So in a moment.
Is it? Yeah, it's me. I would also say, like, for the rectification purpose, what we see a lot of the times where it's not already stated what like how long we're giving for a rectification time. It's important that the client and the cleaning services team, managers, supervisors, operatives sit down and actually set times for rectifications. We are like the cleaning industry, the cleaning teams, the operatives, supervisors, management. You are the specialists in what you do. You understand how long it takes to clean something. You know, how many times we see floors that have been sealed with dirt underneath, and people think it's just a case of getting a bit of a scratchy pad and a non-abrasive pad on it, giving it a good scratch and getting the dirt out. Whereas what we know is that it's going to take us to strip the floor, clean the floor, reseal the floor. We know how long these tasks take. So it's important that we set realistic targets at the start. And it's a lot easier to have those awkward conversations at the start than it is to get months down the line with the client getting annoyed because it's taking you 3 months to get around to, you know, stripping a floor because you haven't got the time or it's not part of your SLA. But it's important to have those conversations at the start, set those times in motion, and have realistic expectations of what your team can do and how quickly they can do it.
Thank you. The next question was quite a popular one. We had a lot, it was asked a lot of times. How regularly should an audit take place and what should the ideal frequency of audits be?
Again, this is something you need to agree with your client, and it may depend on the areas you're cleaning as well. So certainly for NHS, there's different frequency of audits for different areas. But for clients as well, if you're in a food premises, it's going to be a very different schedule to if you're in a general office. So it needs to be by agreement. As an ex-contract cleaner, we used to audit monthly because ours was mainly office and industrial. But that needs to be by agreement with your client itself.
Thank you. And the next one is, when is dust dusty?
I do love this. So there's different levels of dust, as daft as it sounds. I have 3 sisters. I would say all 4 houses have a very different level. One has none at all. One has very little white dust. which is fresh dust, one has grey dust, which is a little older, and one has black dust, and frankly you need a shovel. And that is not my house, before anybody asks.
Thank you, Dee.
Can I add to that, Di? Sorry.
Yes, of course you can.
I think it's also important for us to talk about the fact that, at BICSc, we carry out visual cleaning inspections, which we suggested obviously is best practice for the safety of the person carrying out the task. But also, if we think about dust on a surface, if we do touch audits, and I used to do them before I was led down the best path and kept safe. When we rub our hand across a surface, even if it is white dust, we're so guilty of putting all of that thin layer of dust that's fresh dust together and going, oh, that's absolutely filthy. We are so guilty of doing it. So if we are still on the not so good route of doing a touch audit, you need to think about, when we think about different types of dust, we need to think about how much we're actually pulling together and how much that's creating. If we're running 50 meters down on a conduit, for example, and running our hand along, how much of that is because we've compiled all that dust together? How much was actually on the surface, and how fresh was that? What is it near? Is it near laundry? Is it near paper towels? Is it something that's come off using let's say, for example, a chlorine-based product where a powder comes out after? What was there before? And how much are we actually accumulating ourselves whilst we're actually doing the check?
And in fact, I'll add to that as well. I'm sorry. I had a site where they were using a white paper towel on the floors, and I physically cleaned the floor in front of them. They were happy with the standard, and then they ran the white paper towel across and got dust. And when we looked up, the air conditioning unit was throwing out dust. So there can also be a cause that we need to look for.
Following on from that, ladies, there is another question slightly similar to what Kelsey was talking about, but if clients were running their fingers along desks to check, and this person thinks it's degrading for a cleaner to see it, what would be a better method to suggest in dealing with that?
So when we do the theory of inspection, when we teach about inspection and audit, it's a visual inspection. So we look, because you don't know what you're touching. The client doesn't know what they're touching. And they also don't know, as Kelsey's just said, what they're dragging to actually accumulate to say, oh, look at this. So visual audit would always be our recommendation.
Thank you. Next question is, I would like to be able to attach more photographic evidence.
There's no limit in the app of the photos, so you can attach photo after photo after photo with comment after comment after comment. It's really how much time you've got to actually be able to undertake that audit and inspection.
Lovely, thank you. What is the best time to audit?
We'd always recommend as close to the end of the cleaning time as you can. So if you've got an evening clean and you don't want to wait till the cleaners are finished, audit first thing in the morning. If you've got a morning clean, try and audit towards the end, because then you're being fair to the staff. They've done the job that day. You're not auditing them on something that they haven't completed.
It's also imperative that as we audit as soon after the cleaning as possible. However, that we're not doing it on a Tuesday every single week or on a Wednesday morning every single week, that we're actually changing the times of the audits. I mean, I had it years ago when I was auditing, and I used to have this lovely operative that used to tell me off if I was 5 minutes late for the audit and would be stood at the ward door waiting for me, because that was how we had to schedule it. But we don't clean to an audit. We should never clean to an audit, because the audit process then becomes redundant. So you should also change the days, change the time of the week if you can. Don't just audit Monday to Friday because that's what your schedule is. On some days, do those weekend audits. It's not about setting somebody up to fail. It's to ensure that you are giving consistent delivery at all times, not just on a Tuesday morning when they know that the audit's due.
And also, please vary your pattern. So having worked on large sites, as I say, I was a contractor, I knew what was going to be audited next. We spent extra time in them before the audit was due. So have a variable pattern so that it can't be cleaned, especially before we rock up.
Thank you. Another question has been asked, is there a way to go back once the audit has been closed to close out a job that has been raised when the audit was conducted?
Once the audit is completed, it's a PDF file. So really you're then looking at a re-audit to look at those areas again and say on this date it failed and these were the reasons, and on this date when I've re-inspected it's been put right.
Lovely, thank you. Another good question. One auditor might pick up on something another wouldn't. So how do you guarantee that everyone's attention to detail is the same?
As a contractor, we had 3 monthly meetings of our whole company and we audited our buildings together. As theory of inspections, we recommend everybody audits together and we show them the issues they're looking at and we get them to within a 5 to 10% range, which tends to be a fair sort of differential. We'll never all be identically the same, but I do it with Amelia, I do it with Kels. We audit together so that we're within 5% of each other. So it doesn't matter which one of us you get, we're equally picky.
Thank you.
Kelsey was trying to get in there.
Thanks, Neil. No, yeah, exactly the same. We do it. I mean, me and Amelia, I don't even know how many audits of the BICSc head office we've done together now. I think I could probably memorise the cleaning schedule for BICSc now because of how many times we've done it. We standardise every 6 months. We've done it so far. And then we constantly look through each of us reports as well to make sure that we're using the same vocabulary when we're noting down failure types, fault types on an audit, and constantly review like legislation for the compliance sections as well to make sure that we're all aware of, you know, what we're actually writing down as action points or fault points for the compliance sections as well.
Thank you. If an element is continuously failing, how as an auditor can you change this issue so the audit report is not always the same? I think this was you did go into this a bit during the presentation.
I think if there's a continual failure, it shows a need for retraining. And until you've addressed the base of the issue, you're not going to stop that point. If you've got something that flags continually, then there needs to be an action point to actually address it.
Lovely, thank you. What percentage is the minimum acceptable for a medical centre?
It depends where the medical centre is and what functional risk is applied to it. So it is dependent on what is done within that medical centre and what the grading is. So functional risks have 6 different settings, 6 different AQLs. They're actually set within the app. So the AQLs are there for functional risk 1 to 6.
Thank you. Question, when will the app software be available to use on Windows? Might be one for Neil to answer.
Hello, everybody. The app software is not a Windows product. It's not an Apple product. It is an application able to use on a handheld device. So it is only available from an app store and it's available through Google Play and Apple. There is no other way it will ever be available.
Thank you. How many buildings can be added in a monthly audit?
How much time do you have? You can add the buildings, you can add the blocks, you can add the rooms. How long are you going to spend auditing? I mean, Kels, you do some very big buildings. Have you found a limit yet?
Yeah, it depends how long you've got. It depends. It also depends on the amount of elements in the rooms that are in the building. You know, you can walk into a room and it's like, you know, the most joyous room where you've got one table, a chair, floors and walls. But you've also got rooms that have got 50 tables in, 200 chairs. And obviously, we're not saying that you need to check every single chair, but it depends what your agreement is per audit. I think that the minute that you start trying to time how long an audit takes is the time that you lose, like it's the moment that you lose the utility of an audit. It's important, obviously, that we have an idea of how quickly we can audit. But if we say, right, I'm going to do 40 audits this week, and they're going to be done in X amount of time, you risk losing a lot of if you wanted to do a full audit, you risk losing it. If you set a time, say for example, you're going to spend 4 hours doing an audit, and that 4 hours is the maximum, and you're not, constrained to doing 7 different buildings, let's say, that's fine. But I think it depends one, on how many hours you're willing to work, how much you're willing to look into, and how many elements per room there are.
Thank you, Kelsey. I'm quite conscious of the time. We're getting round to 11:30 when we're due to finish. Neil, has there been any questions come through the chat that we haven't answered so far?
I'll stick to the ones that relate to the topic at hand. There was one here. Is the effectiveness of cleaning products, can it also be measured within a cleaning audit?
It really depends what you're cleaning. So your cleaning product, for me, is as effective as the person that's trained how to use it and the surfaces they're using it on. So certain surfaces don't react well with certain products. Certain products react better with certain circumstances. So your product, really, the best check of that is to use it according to the manufacturer's instructions in the area it's meant to be used, and do the check that way.
Are the audits done randomly? We've already answered. There is a question, how often do audits need to be done in a school environment? I think we've really answered that question, because it depends on your contract with the school. I think the answer to that is, am I right there?
Yeah, it's dependent on your client relationship. Some clients want to see a weekly audit, some clients want to see a monthly audit. It depends what you put down and what you're scheduled to do.
Okay, the next one I'm not sure about, but I'm going to put it out there. If the cleaning schedule says some buildings should be clean on Wednesday and Sunday, what should be the ideal day for the audit? And what % should be considered as path if the company is a marine industry and is under construction site?
Right, so we suggest you do the audit as soon after the cleaning as possible, but on the audit you can actually use the method of saying it's clean between cleans, or it's dirty. So it's acceptable, it's unacceptable, or it's acceptable between cleaning. And that way, if you're checking it on a Friday and you do it on a Wednesday and a Sunday, is it acceptable between those cleans? So is the 2 days dirt, or is the 2 weeks dirt? And it's making that judgment call. And if it's a building site, I think you need to renegotiate your KPIs and your SLAs with your client.
The next question I'll answer is the app free on the Play Store. The app is free to download, free for you to do your first audit. If you want to produce a report, there is a subscription charge, and the subscription charge is either £9.99 a month or £99.99 for the year. Individual membership has varying costs. So if you contact membership at BICSc, Karen will be able to help you out on that. Who is that? Sorry, Keith. The next question I think we've covered. How many times is important to do audits in new buildings, and for hospitals, is there any instruction, or is it's the same for a normal building? I think we've kind of covered that, but somebody want to jump on that one?
Go on then, Healthcare Hargreaves.
Sorry, my speakers went a bit then. Can you repeat the question?
How many times is it important to do an audit in a new building? And for hospitals, is there any different instruction, or is it the same as a normal building?
Okay. Important at the start, when you're implementing cleaning, I would do one at the start so you can see before you start, implementing a new contract, see where you were, how far you've come, and where you want to be. It's a really nice way of also setting AQLs if your client hasn't already set them. In terms of a hospital, believe it or not, Healthcare Hargreaves did write the presentation, so I've tried my hardest to try and keep it as free-flowing as possible, but that healthcare auditing comes through time and time again. The only sort of difference you will find in a hospital is that there are functional risks. If we look at the English standard, for example, which a lot of different countries lend themselves to, you'll have different pass rates and you'll have different policies in place. So it's important, as it is with any audit, to ensure you understand the legislative policy of whatever country you're in, but also the local policies of the hospitals that you're at. I know that within my old trust, what I would fail on one site in one hospital, the hospital 20 miles away, which was part of the same trust, would not have the same local policy. So it's important wherever you are that you are completely up to date with all of the policies. But if we go on to the section that Denise did with the fault types, it might not be written into a healthcare policy that that's the way that you need to speak about things, but it's so standardized. And it means that everybody that reads those audit reports is aware of what contamination type is happening, what's gone on.
There are a few other questions. Some of them relate to things outside of auditing, so I'm not going to jump into them at the moment. But I think we are now past our time for this, so I'll hand back to Di.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil, and thank you, Dee, Kelsey and Amelia. For me, that was absolutely fascinating and a really meaningful insight into the auditing process. So thank you all for attending. We hope you enjoyed it. And watch out for the details of our next webinar in August on youth employment. Thank you all very much.
Just
Thanks.
to answer the final question that's coming in, we won't be giving the PowerPoint slides out, but we will be there will be a video of the whole presentation that will be posted on the website and should be available in the chat. When it's available, you'll all get a link to the video, if I can speak properly today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You.